Hi, I'm gonna walk you through the beginner's version of the Mehta method and hopefully teach you how to solve the cube using it. So, two prerequisites before we get started is firstly, the full Mehta algorithm sheet created by Andreas and Ethan. You will be able to find it in the description. And secondly, I expect that you can solve the cube on your own in preferably less than a minute, otherwise, it might be difficult to follow some of the steps that I'm going to show you, though I'll try to be as detail oriented as possible. Now, before I get started on how to solve the cube using it, I just want to point out two potential benefits of why you should learn this beginner's version. Firstly, the move count is 60 to 65 moves. The cube simulation software say something between 57 and 58 moves. Now 65 moves for a beginner's version is a very low move count, which is good for us, because that way, even if we turn at 2 turns per second, which is really slow honestly, you can still solve the cube in under 30 seconds using a beginner's method. So that's a good decent achievement. Honestly, I feel it's possible to solve the cube in under 15 seconds on an average with very little practice with the beginner's method. Secondly, most of the method, the beginner's method and the full method, are algorithm oriented. So the rate at which you'll improve in the beginning, at least, is going to be extremely drastic. So you should be expecting to get the times that you currently get very soon. The only things that you need to get used to are what step comes after what step and the recognition of each step. An advanced technique later on that you learn is predicting the next algorithm while doing the current one, but that's something that's way beyond the scope of this video. I'm just going to talk about the beginner's version. So now to get started, a first block is a 1x2x3 block of solved pieces on the cube. So for example, if all of these colors were blue and these two colors matched and these three colors matched and these two colors matched, then that would be a solved first block. Now there are 6 sides on a cube and every single side can have potentially 4 first blocks. So that's a total of 24 possible first blocks on a scrambled cube. Now I strongly believe that it is a great benefit to be able to solve any of those 24 blocks, because firstly it does not really hinder any other step later on in the method, and secondly you would be able to solve the first block in 6 to 7 max 8 moves once you get enough practice, which is a pretty good thing, because the more your efficiency, the faster times you get. Now I'm gonna be talking about a very silly way to do the first block in this beginner's walkthrough. Honestly, this way shouldn't even be taught, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna teach it using this way. And if you find that it is too simple for your taste, then you can look up some roux method tutorials which have a similar first step, where you solve a first block on the left side. In this method, we're going to solve the first block on the bottom. But the general concepts should be the same, and typically roux tutorials tend to go way deeper because there are way more of roux tutorials out there. So you could go check that out. But the way I'm going to suggest is very similar to the beginner's method that you might have learnt so far. So let's say that we're going to make the first block on white. So this is the white center. One of the edges is already connected. What we'll do is make 3/4 of a cross. So for example, we can connect the red center, red center to the red edge, red white edge. So we have one edge in place. Then we can put in the orange and we can put in the green. So I should not really have to go through this in depth, but basically what I did was I made the cross, except I did not solve one of the pieces. I just solved 3 of the other ones. After that, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put this in the bottom left, and you're supposed to solve the remaining 2 corners. So over here, you're supposed to have the white, green and red corner, which happens to be right here, luckily. So we can insert it using one of those inserting maneuvers that you might have learned in the beginner's version. So now there's one corner remaining in the first block. We have solved 5 of the pieces. So that's the white, green and orange center, and it happens to be here. So we can just take it to the top layer using the right face. Remember that we have not solved this cross edge yet, so we can move the right face the way we want and we won't be spoiling anything. So we can just do this and it doesn't matter. And now the corner is in the top layer and you can insert it using whatever beginner version of corner insertion you might have learned. So now we have solved a first block in the bottom left, and this is very much like a roof first block. The roof first block would look like this, and this looks like this. Now we are not gonna go deeper into this step. If you want to learn how to do it in a better way, I already talked about looking at other root tutorials. I'm gonna move on to the second step. The second step is called the belt. The belt is basically solving the equator slice. So basically I'll be solving 1, 2, 3 and 4 edges, and that way I should be done with the second step. Note that this is not exactly the step in the full method. The full method has only 3/4 of the belt, but you can look that up later on. Right now we're just talking about the beginner's version. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna look in the top layer or wherever we want and try to find a piece that belongs in the E slice. So for example, over here we have the blue orange piece, which belongs between these two edges, these two centers. So what we'll do is we'll connect this edge with a matching center so that they combine like this. We'll bring the entirety of this thing towards on the right face, and then we can insert this thing just using an R. Remember, we don't need to use any fancy insertions because we have solved absolutely nothing on the right side of the cube. So we can move the right face as we want. So we're going to be using only the right face, the upper face and the U wide turning to be solving this entire step. As you get advanced, there'll be exceptions to this, but we'll not dwell into that. So what I did was I connected one of the edges to the centers and I just put it in by doing an R turn. So now I have solved this edge. I have to do the same process 3 more times. So for example, I have this particular edge which is already connected to the center. I brought it using the U wide to the right face, and now I can just do an R2 and now it's solved. And luckily we have this piece already solved. I had not seen that. But this happens quite often. It happens like in 20-25% of the solves that one of the E slice edges is going to be solved. And now we have a case that is not really great, but I mean, we always have these kind of cases. It's when the last edge is stuck in its place. It's not in the U layer basically, but it's not solved either. So in this case, all you have to do is you put in any random edge in the slot that is unsolved. What that will do is it will bring out this edge to the top. So for example, if I insert this edge here using an edge insertion or whatever, for example R U prime R prime. So what that will do is it will take out this edge into the top layer somewhere. We can just move the top layer to show you how it looks. So now we have again connected the centers, and now we can bring it to the right side. So now here is an important thing to note. Now you can't simply do an R to solve this edge, because what that will do is it will mess up this edge that was already formed. So in such cases, which will happen around the end of the belt most of the times, what you do is instead of simply doing an R, you just move the edge aside somewhere and you do an R prime in the beginning, or an R depending on. Basically you move the solved piece to the bottom, and now you connect the centers. What that will do is that will bring these two across from each other, and you just solve the belt. Basically all I did was I inserted this edge over here into the back, but I just wanted to be extra elaborate when I was describing that for the interest of whatever audience I get. So basically that's it. One thing that you might come across is cases like this. So where once you solve 3 of the belt edges, the 4th belt edge is actually stuck in the bottom. There's no belt edge over here, the belt edge is stuck in the bottom. In such case, all you do is you take out the belt edge using R2, move it aside somewhere, and then do R2 again. So now what that will do is that will just bring it to the top somewhere, and then you can do the same things that we talked about earlier, that is bring these on the right, and now since we cannot simply do an R, move it aside and do an insertion. So now as you can see, we have solved the first block, and independent from that we have solved a belt. And the belt can be very efficient once you get good at it, because we have a free right side. So we just have R, U and U wide moves to do. So you can utilize this free slice to cut down a lot of other moves. One thing you might notice is my first block and my belt are not exactly aligned. I mean, technically to make it truly solved, I should have put it in this particular permutation, I guess. But that's not necessary. What we're going to do in this method is basically keep it like this. We're going to complete the entire solve, and after we have done the entire solve, we are going to do a D prime. Or whatever, we're going to adjust the down face. We're going to do an ADF. Now that's usually a good thing, because firstly that saves you a U wide move, and secondly it gives you an opportunity to cancel somewhere in the middle of the solve a U prime for a U wide prime, so that will save you one move. There are a couple of other advantages, but basically it's like solving pseudo F2L. It's one of those techniques that sub 8 solvers in CFOP might use some of the times, but in this method you basically use it all of the time. So now once you have done this much, and I hope you have understood all that I said so far, because from now on all that you have to do is algorithms. Everything from this point on, after the first block and the belt, is algorithms in the beginner's version of the method. Here comes one of the dreaded steps in most of the other methods, called edge orientation, but in this particular method it's not difficult at all. So if you notice, we have only 5 unsolved edges now. 4 are on the top layer and 1 is over here in DR. So we have 5 unsolved edges, and notice that all of them belong to either the top layer or the bottom layer. So we can segregate them into good or bad edges if you want, but a simpler way to go about it is just look at the top center and see which colors are matching and which colors are not, and that should be enough for you to recognize the entire case. So in this case, oh, by the way, what you need to know is what the set of opposite colors on your cube are. If your cube follows the standard color scheme, then you'll always have white opposite to yellow center, blue center opposite to green center, and orange center opposite to red center. So in this particular case, this edge is oriented because it is either white or yellow on top. I mean, this is white on top. This is not oriented because it is neither white nor yellow on top. This is not oriented because it is neither white nor yellow on top. This is not oriented because it is neither white nor yellow on top. And frankly, we don't care about this edge because this is enough information for us to recognize the case. And this will be the same no matter what color you choose. For example, if you had done the first block on the blue side, then we'd have green on top, and then we'd identify the good edges from bad edges by seeing whether green or blue was on top or not. So in this case, we have 3 bad edges on top. So we do the particular algorithm for this case. So I'll just open the beginner algorithms page on the algorithm sheet. And the first column that you're going to see is the 5 edge orientation cases that you can get. I'll just walk through all 5 of them because it's just 5 cases and all of them are really short. So this is one of the best cases. You have 3 edges that are unoriented on top. So you put those 3 on the right side. Basically, you put the only oriented edge on the left side. and then you do S prime U S. Or if you want, if you like, if you don't mind rotating, which I don't recommend, you can do rotate M prime U M and or M prime U prime N or M or whatever you want. But honestly, I think you should stick to S prime U S or S prime U prime S, depending on whatever you want. So that will solve EO completely. Basically, now all the edges are either white or yellow pointing top. So that was one of the cases. One of the other cases is when none of the 4 edges on top have the same or opposite color as the top center. So this is all 4 bad edges on top. So this is the worst case, but also luckily this is the rarest of all of the cases. The algorithm for this is R2 U2 S prime US R2. Now this is a fairly long algorithm compared to the other algorithms that we have in this method, but I mean, this is really rare, so it doesn't really matter. Then you have this case where you have only one edge that is misoriented on top. These 3 are correctly oriented because all 3 of them have either white or yellow on top. This one does not. So the algorithm goes by putting the misoriented edge in front. So I'll keep it here and I'll do R prime F R2 F prime R prime, and it's really quick to do because I mean, it's really quick, and once you get good at it, you can do it much faster than I'm doing right now. So that's this case, and the remaining 2 cases are when you have 2 oriented edges on top. So one of them is the line case. So you have 2 oriented edges in the same line. So this is the same as the beginner's algorithm F sexy move or R2 R prime U prime F prime. So that's the 6 mover. And the other case is when you have 2 oriented edges that are adjacent to each other. So the 2 unoriented edges are also adjacent to each other. So for that, what you're going to do is you're going to put the 2 unoriented edges at one towards you and one towards the right. And you can either do the beginner's algorithm, which is F U R U prime R prime F prime, or you can do this slightly shorter but more difficult to execute algorithm, which is R F R2 F prime R. Both of them accomplish basically the same thing as long as EO is concerned, so you can pick either of those. I think both of them are given in the sheet, and if not, you can just refer to this video. I don't think I need to delve more into how edge orientation is done, at least for the beginners version of the method. So we'll go to the next step. So the next step that we're going to do is corner orientation. So what we want at the end of this major step is so that all the corners 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, all the 6 corners that are unsolved yet, basically all the corners on the right and the top face, be oriented. By oriented, again it means the same thing, either white or yellow faces the top, or in the case of these guys, either white or yellow faces the bottom. So this is an oriented corner, these 3 are not, this is an oriented corner and this one is not. So in the beginner's version, we are going to split this step into 2 sub-steps. We're just going to call them 6CO1 and 6CO2. 6CO1 is, by the way, 6CO stands for 6 corners orientation. So 6CO step 1 is basically you want both of the bottom corners to be oriented correctly. Now this particular step might be slightly difficult to get used to, but I'll try my best to explain it to you. There are 4 basic cases. Let me bring out one of the easier cases. Okay, so all you have to do is look at the top layer. Forget about the bottom layer. All you have to do is look at the top layer and see how many corners on the top are oriented. If you see that 2 corners on the top are oriented and they're adjacent to each other like this, so this one is oriented, this one is oriented, and they're adjacent to each other, then you can orient the bottom two corners by simply doing R2, U2, R2. Basically now those corners just go down and they remain oriented. This is one of the better cases, and I mean basically if you have it from this angle, you just do a U2 so that both of those come to the left side of the cube, and again you do R2, U2, R2. And remember that this is not the same case. This again has two oriented corners on the top, but they're diagonal from each other. So this is not the same case. What we want is two corners to be oriented adjacent to each other. If we don't have that case, then we definitely have at least one of the three cases that are mentioned in the alg sheet. So now what we care about is a pair of diagonal corners that are unoriented. Now what I mean by that is, in this particular case, this corner is misoriented, and the corner diagonal to it on the upper face, which is this one, is also misoriented. So if you do not have two corners that are oriented adjacent to each other on the top layer, for example over here you have only one corner that is oriented on top, or for example even over here if you have two corners but they're not adjacent to each other, then you will always have at least one set of corners that are diagonal to each other that are misoriented. So in this case we have these two. So these two corners will define the 601 case that we need to solve. So there are three possible cases. The three of them are listed in the alg sheet. One of them is two of them are when the corners, white or yellow stickers, I mean the top or the bottom stickers are parallel to each other. So this one is looking back and this one is looking towards me. It could be like this, where this one is looking back and this one is looking towards me. These two are sort of mirror images of each other. And the third case is an L. So again we have these two corners. So this one is looking to the right side and this one is looking towards me. So these are the three possible cases that you have, and for each of these cases you have an algorithm that you can do. So let's just solve the L case using the first algorithm in the alg sheet that is given. So for the L case, what you do is for these two corners you put them such that, for these two corners again, you put them such that one of the corners is facing away from me and the other corner is facing towards the left, and then you do the algorithm, which is R prime U2 R U prime R2 U2 R U R, and that should give you two oriented corners at the bottom. So note that these two are oriented. And similarly, let me just ruin this a little. Yeah. So similarly, what you may have sometimes is this particular case. So now what we have is this corner is oriented on top, and these two are the set of diagonal corners that are misoriented. So over here this is looking towards the right and this is looking towards the left. So this is actually the second case in the 601 list. So we can use the algorithm D prime R U prime R prime D U2 R U prime R prime, and what that will do is, again, it will orient the two corners at the bottom. I mean basically it will put those two corners at the bottom in the correct orientation, but I don't think that is an important thing for you to know. Basically this works. Sometimes what may happen is you have absolutely no corners on top that are oriented. So that way you actually have two cases of 601 at the same time. So in such situations what I do is I typically choose to do the L case, but you can just do whatever you want. For the sake of simplicity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just by doing the L case. So these two form the L case, so I'm going to put them in the correct place. So this one is facing away from me and this one is facing towards the left, and I can just do the algorithm for the L case, that is R prime U2 R U prime R2 U2 R U R, and that should solve the two corners at the bottom. And now you're finally at the 6CO2 state, where basically all the corners at the bottom are done, and all you need to care about are the corners at the top. So once you're done with 601, we can go to 602. If you're done with 601, you'll basically have both the bottom corners oriented already. So now we can move on to 602, where you have to orient all the top corners. You have 7 possible cases. They're basically exactly the same as the 7 cases you get in Look OLL. But over here, some of the algorithms are slightly better because we don't really need to preserve this block. So this case that we have here is basically back zone. You have one oriented corner and these 3 corners go this way. So we can just do the algorithm RU2 prime, R prime, U prime, RU, R prime, and that will solve the corners on the top. So we are done with 6U because all the corners are oriented now. Similarly, we have the edge case, where you could use the same algorithm, or there are other versions like R prime U2, R U2, R U2, R U2, R prime, but that's not as fast. One of the places where you get a really fast algorithm is basically this one, where you have the headlights case. So you put the headlights on the right, and then you basically do 3 sexy moves and you get a solved case. I did 3 inverse sexy over there, but yeah, that's quite an improvement. Another improvement is the L case. So if you have the L case on top, then you can do R D prime, R U prime, R D prime, D R prime, R prime, D R prime, and that will solve 6U. All of these algorithms are in the alg sheet. So I think 6U has been covered enough, and now what we need to do are the final 2 steps, that are 6CP and EPLL. Both of these are extremely easy, so I don't think the video is going to last long from this point. So now what we have to do is we need to find the corner that belongs in DBR, that is over here. So in this case, it's going to be the corner white, red and blue. So DBR as in, I mean, it has to be connected to the first block, right? So it's this corner. So what we do is we insert this corner back in here. So we have done DBR. So we're done with DBR now. And now we have 5 corners remaining. 6 CP means 6 corners permutation. But basically what we did was we manually solved 1 corner. So that drastically reduces the number of cases from, I think, 47 to 8. So now what we'll have remaining are 8 possible cases once we have solved the DBR corner. And the DBR corner is always going to be solved using an R2 U R prime, or R2 U R2 prime, or R2 U to R2 prime, or one of those kinds of triggers. Once we have solved the DBR corner, we're going to end up with 8 possible cases. So 2 of the possible cases are, one of them is JPerm. I mean, this does not look like a JPerm, but you have a pair of headlights on top, and what you want is headlights everywhere. So basically you put the headlights on the left and you do JPerm, and you get headlights everywhere, and basically now you have solved 6CP. Another case that you can get is YPerm, where you have opposites everywhere on the top layer, but none of the top corners is white. So in this case, you just do YPerm. The algorithms are given in the alg sheet. And the remaining 6 cases are when one of the white corners is on top. So once you solve DBR, if one of the white corners still is in the top layer, then what you do is you put it at the UFL location like this, and then you recognize the 6CP case. The way you recognize the 6CP case is basically you see where you find opposites or headlights. So in this case, you have opposites here, opposites in front, and nothing on the right. So since you have opposites in front and nothing on the right, the algorithm that we're going to use is this, which is basically given in the ALK sheet. You may have other cases, such as we have adjacent here and headlights here. So this particular case is UR2 DR2 UR2 U prime R2. Yeah, so that's all 6CP. Basically we have headlights everywhere now on the top layer, and the bottom layer corners are solved. And recognizing 6CP, at least in the beginners stage, is extremely easy. Basically all you have to do is, if you have white corner on top, you put it in this location, and then you see which of the 6 cases it is. One case has opposites in front, one case has opposites on right, one case has opposites on both front and right. One case has headlights in front, one case has headlights on right, and one case has headlights on both front and right. So these are the 6 cases if white is on top, if the white corner is in the top layer. And if there's no white corner on the top layer, then you have either J perm or Y perm, or you have a skip case. So basically that's it for 6CP. Now all that we are remaining with is EPLL. We are remaining with L5 EP, the last 5 edges permutation. Well, the 5 edges that are unsolved yet are the 4 on the top layer and the one at the bottom, but they are oriented. So in the beginner's version, what we're going to do is, if we have a white edge on top, we're simply going to insert it to the bottom by putting it on the right, and we're going to do S prime U2 S. Or if that's not to your taste, then we can do R2 S prime. Both of them accomplish basically the same thing. I prefer to do S prime U2 S, but people have been saying that the other one is a bit faster, so just pick whichever one you like. But basically all you do is you insert this edge inside, so that reduces the number of EPLL cases from 16 to 4. And these are the same 4 cases that you expect in a normal CFOP solve. Basically you have one of the U perms, so this is a U perm where you have this block. You can have the other U perm, the clockwise U perm, or you can have the H perm or the Z perm. All of the algorithms are given in the ALK sheet, so I won't be going in depth into how to solve these. So basically you just solve this. And the solve from this point should, I assume, be straightforward for you if you understood everything so far. Basically you have to adjust the upper face and the lower face. You can do both of them simultaneously, or what some people like to do is they adjust the down face before the EPLL, so that they have to adjust only the upper face after the EPLL. Experiment with whatever you like. This is basically it for the beginners method. I don't think there is any complication other than maybe a little bit of confusion that you might have in the 6CO1 step. Any questions, let me know, and I'll hopefully make an intermediate and advanced version of the tutorial and every single thing that you can do with the method soon. And I'll also make a video about how to solve a 2x2 and big cubes and a square one and a pyraminx using this method. So stay tuned.